I'm really interested in the time traveling that happens and the relationship of the present to objects that have also lived in another time. I do think about this sort of middle ground, this kind of threshold between the dream world and reality, also ghosts and spiritual things, as well as the quite literal experiences that one's having. I'm interested in kind of the spirit that objects hold, also paintings hold. I think this comes from antiquing and going to places where you sort of find these works of art or somebody's old box that they used to keep their jewelry in. But there's something so magical about how many hands have touched those things, or how many eyes have seen them, how many stories these things hold. There's this faded quality and something that you can't really tell exactly when it's been made that I want to replicate. Color is my main love in painting. Umbers and siennas and earth tones. I feel like there's something that is a bit timeless about those colors. I like ones that don't feel too modern and things that feel like they could have existed in any period. My giant Indian yellow that I have to bring everywhere and I sleep with. I want the work to not feel quite so fresh-faced. A limited palette for me means that I can have a really deep relationship with the colors that I'm using, and I like sort of giving myself parameters in a trap. I'm Lily Rose Fine. I'm an oil painter, and I'll be talking about my practice at Jackson Studio. My earliest memories of making art, I don't think I have like one early memory because I grew up around art. My parents are animators and all of their friends are artists. I didn't really think too much about that being not a normal childhood, and I was always drawing. In elementary school, there was these little art competitions in the school to get your drawings up on the wall in the hallway, and I would always apply for those and work really hard. We would still visit London often since that was where my mom was from, and my uncle used to take me to the Henry Moore House. I was very inspired by that space. Tate Modern, Tate Britain, National Gallery, the Portrait Gallery. I think the Portrait Gallery particularly was one that I went in and was like, this is what I have to do. The faces staring at me from all of history was just like this intense relationship with these people and this kind of parasocial relationship with these paintings. And so I just was obsessed with like the details in them. I still go to galleries and I forget to step back because I'm staring at like a single corner with really lovely brushstrokes and trying to figure out how they layered the colors. And I think that kind of getting really wrapped up in exactly how one would paint the folds or the way that an eye socket was done and simplified was where I built some of my love for painting and need to kind of harness whatever was happening in those paintings that like made me feel something. Living in Vancouver, there was this art high school that I applied to, this mini program called Lord Byng Arts Mini Program. Yeah, I got into that. So my high school too was visual arts focused. There was also drama and music. I was really lucky to go there. It just was like the clear path. It was what I never really questioned whether I could do anything else. With oil paint, it's a little bit like I'm a real artist. And I think that everybody kind of feels like starts that way a bit, like they need to prove themselves by painting oil. But acrylic can be great. And I feel like it's just how you use them and how you make it yours. I mean, I think the only reason that I still stick to oil for the bulk of the painting is that, one, I feel like the pigments themselves really shine in oil. The other element is how much you can curate it and adapt the way that the paint looks for your own needs. So matteness or textures or the layering or the techniques that you can build, and you can really adapt that with all the range of mediums that you can add to oils. I do the underlayers in acrylic because I feel like I can think through the image faster when it can dry, and I can go over it, cover something, fix it, move something over. It's a little bit more immediate. It's usually sticking to quite warm tones, and it still feels quite glazy and glowy. It's still glowing from the white gesso underneath. Some blue for shadows, but quite a bright blue. Trying to keep all the vibrancy that I can until I'm on my final go of it, because then I can really pull things back and make things dark, but it's like very hard to go the other direction. And then when I go to my oil layer, I can start kind of glazing over what I've done. I keep some of the image and then just play around with the textures and the colors and how they overlay and how the light goes through them. And when I was working a little bit more thick, I would use beeswax in my paints. I wanted the texture of icing, and so I still like that in parts. I think Philip Guston said that in his show, that he wanted his paintings to look like cake icing, and that stuck with me. Yeah, recently I've been sort of trying new combinations for my glazing liquid, and I don't necessarily think I've hit the perfect thing. I'm using stand oil so that it dries faster, as well as either Gamsol or Shell Salty. I used to work really thick, all in one go, kind of do a painting from beginning to end, stop, next painting, and that was just the only way I could figure out how to work. I think it's with having more space in my studio, also having a bit more time over the period of days. I can keep coming back to it or leave something for a while and then do another pass at it, and I think it's producing something more interesting. I want to maintain that immediacy, but I think the combination is useful. After high school, I applied for the Ontario College of Art and Design University. I was really interested in illustration at the time. I loved comics and graphic novels. I was not the strongest reader, and so I think graphic novels were my way into really appreciating stories and language, and I think there's really great comic community there. There's an amazing bookstore called The Beguiling, which I would go to all the time, and I got a lot of inspiration from people's zines and DIY projects, and I did a comic and they would take copies of my book to sell, and I think that was something where I really felt like I was part of this local art world. But at the time, I don't think I was pretty naive to more of the like painting and fine art scene there. And so I went to the illustration program at OCAD. And I think I was really lucky to have chosen that program because we shared a lot of classes with the fine art program. So we got really in-depth painting and drawing classes. And I think that just guided me towards painting even further. One of the teachers, Lauchie Reid, was someone who just made oil painting seem like no big deal, and there was a really easy way in. And I think that was fully like, I never turned back. I was really obsessed with that. After university, I started working in children's books and editorial illustration. I was really enjoying that. And then, my kids' books all were during COVID, and it was giving me a step back to think about what I was doing in my spare time, what I was doing when it wasn't for work. And I was painting. I was at home oil painting, doing portraits of my friends. I then had this realization, which maybe a lot of people had in COVID, where you either sort of go back to where you were before all that, or you start something new. I really felt like I needed to give my painting, this thing that I loved like my whole life and kind of put on the back burner, a real shot. And so, I moved in that direction. I'm really interested in using symbols within my work because I think it brings a language that can be interpreted. They come from my interests. They come from, the things that I'm inspired by and the things that hold meaning to me. Strange looking dice or playing cards, or, I get really wrapped up in these tiny objects. And I think for me, they almost feel like good luck charms, or sometimes the things that are stereotypically bad luck charms, I also think are quite interesting. I love things that possess a lot of power, like a black cat walking across the street. People sort of hold so much meaning in that, but they're very potent imagery that I think when you look at them, you can't help but feel like there's something more about them. There's more narrative there than them just literally having been on the table or something. I think repeating them also sort of intensifies their meaning. Someone's going to think, oh, in this painting, that has a certain context and maybe it means that. And now I see it again in this painting, and it can change the meaning, or it can amplify that thing must mean what you think it does. I think it's almost like trying to decipher a cryptid message where you think, okay, well, that must be the A because I'm seeing it in all these places that make sense that it's the A. I come to my paintings with a idea of what I think they're about and what I'm painting about and where they come from. But I don't necessarily always think that somebody else really needs to know all of that. I think there is something much more interesting in the miscommunication, in the reinterpretation of whatever I'm sort of presenting. I like that collaboration. I like not being so explicit and more using images that, for me, hold a lot of potent feelings but could be completely articulated differently by somebody else. It's world building, really, for myself. There is an element of theater. Most of my work, I paint my best friend Eryn, as well as myself and some other people who are really close to me, my partner and other friends. It kind of feels like I'm making a set. It feels like I'm, casting a play. Like Erin's my actor that I use to play these roles within my paintings, and then all the little objects and symbols within them are kind of all building this stage. And it's not for anyone's story in particular, but it is something that I like to play with. But I think that I've started really focusing in on Eryn because, I know her so deeply, more than most people, but there's still this level of distance in that we're platonic best friends. But also just my relationship with her face. I mean, I know it so well and I see it all the time, but also painting it makes me feel like I can know her better, and I'm sort of almost unveiling things, even though I've known her for I guess about almost 10 years now. And it's almost like being able to talk to her in another language that I can't otherwise. I think normally I'm very goal-driven and thinking about what these paintings are for or what I'm doing with them or where they need to go. You'll never feel good enough. You shouldn't feel good enough because you got probably another, hopefully 70 years of painting in your life. What are you going to do with all that time if you're good enough? And I think I try to channel that now in my own studio, enjoying the time, the experience of the doing it, as opposed to being harsh on myself about the outcome. The beginning of the process is thinking about what I'm painting, but the way that I set it up is so that I can just kind of then get absorbed and do it. And there's this structure that I'm painting within, but all of it becomes abstract after a point because I'm not overthinking about it looking like a perfectly realistic face. I'm just more obsessed with the feeling of it, the texture of it. I do love a goal. I love trying to make work for something or, enter a competition. There's a level that can get out of hand and I have to quiet. I have to be careful with how much I look at things online or compare myself to other people. Also, just compare yourself even to artists in history, because where we're at now is just a different existence than the great artists that lived before. And I feel like I'm always improving with each painting, but of course none of them are enough. But I look back and there's elements of older paintings that I really want to maintain and bring into new things, but they always feel like an older iteration of myself. You get older and then you're like, oh, it's not even enough to be if you somehow got signed with this major gallery, but now you're still not the youngest artist to have ever signed with that gallery. It's so ridiculous. You're comparing yourself to every accolade that somebody else has gotten, then shoot, missed that boat. It's crazy. I'm cliquey with my colors. I cannot live without a giant tube of Indian yellow, and specifically Winsor & Newton Indian yellow, because I've tried ones in some very fancy brands, but they somehow are not the same kind of deep and transparent color. It's like working with caramel. It's the best color ever. And then the other one is burnt sienna. I think that combination, I use those ones in my glazes whenever there's a painting that's feeling not super cohesive or I need to kind of pull it back. I will just do a wash of burnt sienna or Indian yellow, and sap green is another one. Those three are basically the core of all of my paintings. I don't like working with buying any colors that I can mix really easily. I think there's something that happens when I'm mixing things on my palette where there's a modeling, because I'm not always getting them identical when I remix it, or I can mix a color and slightly have a little bit more red in it here and a little more yellow there. And I think that creates a lot more interest and a more personal style within my painting. I don't let myself buy black. And that's actually from my tutor in university, who gave me a palette when I was scared of oil painting that was just 6 colors and was like, you don't need anything else. You can mix everything with these. You get so much more of a depth of color, and it's more about how dark it looks compared to the rest of the painting, and instead of it just being this black hole. I kind of get like special colors from Michael Harding, like Naphthol red and Venetian red. I think little ones that I can be a bit more precious about, and they're not my go-tos because they're really nice pigments. But I think when I feel too precious about the paints then that I need to use all the time, it makes me a bit stingy with them. For me, starting my focus on painting was applying to the drawing year at the Royal Drawing School. I'd always wanted to live in London. I was born here but hadn't lived there for my whole life. And so I'd always had this craving to move back and experience some time in a city that I love and have always been very inspired by. It wasn't drawing in particular that I wanted to do over painting, but I think the structure of the program and the caliber of work that was coming out, the artists that I saw, that was how I found out about the program. We had classes at the National Gallery and outdoor classes where we'd go all around London and draw outside, and I think I personally would never been able to push myself to do those things without it being part of this program. I guess I've always studied adjacent things to painting. You know, there's so many different jobs or outputs for drawing being the core part of learning. And so I think it was more of a lens to get better, even though I think throughout the whole time I've still had this core love of physically painting. It was just an intense program that meant that I was constantly drawing, constantly making, and I think that really upped my work ethic. It also upped my hand, my instincts, being able to look at things and interpret them, and I think the confidence built out of that. It's just the practice, as opposed to any drawings being incredible from a certain class. It was the intensity of the program that I think really pushed me. I find it interesting, similar to, the threshold between reality and spectrality. I think that there is a strange ambiguity in the desire to know, either it be somebody has a secret journal, or you're worried people are whispering about you, or maybe you're the one on the inside and you have a secret with a friend that you have this special relationship with them because only you hold this, and you're kind of keeping people at a distance. I think with art, there is this relationship because you connect so deeply, say, to a song that relates so much to a certain time of your life, or a painting that you think, oh wow, it almost feels as if they know my life or know me, and they're also kept at a distance. They're not theirs. They're completely irrelevant to their lives. But I like that push and pull of feeling accepted in and relating to something, but also having to stay at a distance and not being completely let in. I think with especially horror films, where they kind of keep you guessing, and where your mind goes in that in-between space is really all of the magic. I think I like the tension between one thing and another, maybe contradicting ideas. We always think that everything is kind of black and white, but really there's so many things that are both true at the same time. And I think that's where this buzz happens. I mean, even as simple as putting two contrasting colors next to each other and it literally vibrates when you're talking about color theory. I think in the same way, there's so many human experiences and stories where there's contradicting feelings or emotions. You're both happy and also upset by something, and or scared and also in love. And I think that tension is where things really buzz for me. I try not to overplan my work because I think I have a habit of seeing the painting that I want to make in my head, and I then try to execute it. And of course, it's never going to be the strange, blobby, dreamlike thing in my head. It's always going to be a real thing that sort of doesn't live up to that image. And so I think that no matter what, it does have to go on its own journey. And I want to try to get better at responding to what the painting really needs and letting something go off the path instead of sticking to that original idea because I feel like I need to execute that. Drawing is a really fundamental thing to even all the paintings that I do. Every time I do a painting, there's always charcoal underdrawings. And I think that having the skeleton of what I make be drawing has really helped me sort of have an immediacy to the paintings. I think there's something about beginning on the canvas, having that confidence. I'm not really a slow builder kind of worker. And I'm more of a kind of immediate, let's see if this works. If it doesn't, scrap, new one. And I think that kind of quick working helped me build my own hand that became very intuitive. I think I should sketch more, but I do use sketchbooks to plan. They're more like a notebook. They're not good drawings by any means, but it's more just to remember what I'm thinking about. Sometimes I read them back and it's like reading a dream that you wrote down because you thought it was so smart, but then like once you're actually awake, you realize how insane it sounds. I think sometimes they become that, but sometimes they stay, and I have an idea that I've written down that is not something I can find an image for or really do. It doesn't feel like it's coming to me easily, and like a year or two later, I will go back to it and suddenly feel like, oh yeah, I can really make that painting now, actually. It's a discussion, a heated discussion with myself. Yeah, I paint on canvas and wood sometimes too. I usually for canvas will prime it with an acrylic gesso and then slowly add in a warm tone into the gesso so that it's kind of glowing a warm tone from within. Then the acrylic layer is the next one, and that sometimes is just to cover the surface with color to be able to start getting some like mottled tones. Some of my favorite paintings I've ever done and the surface of them have been paintings that I have done over old paintings. But I think there's something in that's the unpredictability of the textures that it gives you something to work with. You're not working on a blank canvas. It's not that intimidating thing. It's also, you're already painting over something you hate, so you're kind of letting yourself just do whatever, and that freedom always gets me to a better place. So I've been trying to figure out how I can more intentionally do that with new pieces without having to do a bad painting first. And I'm still experimenting, but some of that is creating a surface that has a bit more grit. So maybe adding sand or a medium that has some texture to it. It's a little bit absorbent, so there's this, you're left with a lot of pigment and less oil, sort of matte and dusty feeling, but also there's these textures of the surface that your brush will catch on, and these unpredictable things will happen, which always makes me feel like there's something exciting happening because it's not all my intention. Some things happen that I didn't realize, and I can then from there edit that. I mostly use pointed round brushes. I wish they were less pointy. I would love them to be like as round as the filbert, but all the way around. You know what I mean? But anyway, I'll sometimes trim my own brush to be that shape. But I also love a disgusting old brush. Like I've had brushes for like since high school, years, and they're my favorite brushes because they're ruined and they do like a great sort of dry brush effect. I feel like I love being really mean to my brushes, and so if I ever buy really fancy new precious ones, yeah, it makes me too careful. I'm trying to relieve myself of anything that makes me too precious while working, and I can just kind of go for it and not think I'm like ruining something really expensive. I think if it's going wrong and I feel like I can save it, then I usually try to put it aside, work on other things, take some space away. Also, sometimes just like if things are going wrong, it might just be that I need to go home or eat a meal or like hang out with friends and then like come back to reality and you really can't like create interesting work if you're not really like feeling fulfilled in the rest of your life, I find. And so I try to garden. I try to make a really nice dinner for myself, try to watch some movies that are inspiring. And I think usually it's because I'm only going to keep making it worse if I stay in that headspace. So I think it's more about switching gears and coming back. And I often, when I come back to the studio and I look at it, I have a new perspective. I have a new idea. And coming to terms with sometimes you just have to be like, this whole bit is going to go and I'm just going to make it something else, and letting things go off the rails and be something else that you didn't originally intend. I usually do feel like I can finish a piece and then either I like it or I don't, and if I don't like it, then it's becoming a new painting and I'm painting over it. I don't normally look at an old painting and think, I wish I'd changed this little thing about the hand or something. Like, that's why I'm like, it's done, because it's normally that I have an issue with like the whole thing, that it really just has to be a different painting, or I should have done it differently, not like, oh, the nose looks awkward, because that I would have fixed that in the moment. Partly the strategy for not overworking something is that I try to have a surface that isn't blank, so that I'm not actually trying to like cover everything from my painting. It's more like the surface that I have already has colors there. It already has the acrylic underlayer I know I'm going to mostly cover up, but it at least means that if I do something that I like and then I don't want to go near it, I don't want to affect it, then it's not just like blank white canvas underneath. There's enough there that I can leave it. It looks fine. It's relieving the pressure that anything actually looks unfinished. There's something inspiring to me about finding something that is old and repurposing it into something new, and also objects that once had a use and were a functional thing and maybe lived in somebody's home. Somebody was like using them every day, be it a chair or a cabinet or, a shelf or something, or a mirror. And then now I'm making them completely useless. I mean, not useless. Art is useful. It's very important, but it's also just I'm making them into this object that is just to be observed and not touched and not used. It's also a context in order to get something, and you have to work around that. It's a bit of a puzzle, and I think that sometimes inspires me to do things that I wouldn't have thought to do otherwise, in that I'm getting something that's a certain shape, or with one that I did that was in this corner cabinet, the two pieces were facing each other, and I think that then starts to build a relationship between those paintings and build a narrative that I can't ignore, as well as then noticing that it kind of felt like it looked like a stage. And so I built the curtains around it and made an object for the inside. And these things come naturally as I go. And I think anything to kind of interrupt my habit of over planning or going in with a certain expectation of what I want something to look like is really good for me. So I've also been thinking about building my paintings into a structure that kind of resembles vanity mirrors or altarpieces. The vanity mirrors think about the reflection of your own interpretation of these paintings, about like kind of the narcissism that we have inherently in experiencing art or music or films and relating them back to our own lives. So that's how we like enjoy these mediums a lot. The altarpieces are kind of a symbol of devotion. They're a symbol of really respecting something and feeling like it's the juxtaposition between something that is kind of selfish, but then also something that is supposed to be selfless. And I think that juxtaposition is constant all over nowadays. And I mean, I feel myself. So I do think that shape and that structure for my paintings really kind of gives a context for how I want my paintings to be received. I have a studio in Vancouver. It's in a room on my own in a shared building, and I try to set it up so that I paint both on the wall and also on an easel. I have multiple spaces where I can work on different paintings throughout the day. I also have a cart where I keep all of my paint so I can wheel it around next to me, and a beautiful old desk that I found that has drawers that are impossible to open. I have a bunch of books that I always looked at the pictures and never read. And recently when I moved back to Vancouver, decided I should read them all because I was waiting on an art supply order. And amazingly, reading is so inspiring. Who would have thought? And so I try to spend a lot of time there, even if I'm really not in the mood to paint. I have a little very ugly couch that I will sit on and read books, watch art videos. I try to like force myself to not let myself like look at things or consume anything in the studio that is not going to feel related to or keep me in that headspace. Now that I live in Vancouver, I live like a 5-minute walk from my studio, and I walk down and I usually start by kind of organizing my space, getting the paintings that I want to work on first up on the wall, and stepping back, looking at things, kind of taking my time. I make a cup of tea right away, and I play some music or podcast or nothing. I'm very like, it really depends on my mood, but usually I just kind of set an atmosphere that makes me feel like I can really, sets me up for the whole day. After that, I'll get into a painting. I will usually work on one thing until lunch, and there's usually obvious things that I feel more drawn towards, and having multiple things on the go also means that I can kind of look at the work and see what's drawing me in and what's actually keeping my attention. I always pack a lunch for myself. That is very important part of my studio. Every day, I have a biscuit and a cup of tea at around 3 or 4 p.m. It's very essential to me. Everyone who has ever shared a studio with me will know that I have hobnobs in my studio, and sometimes they secretly disappear. But everyone's gonna be hobnobbed by the end of the day. My setup can be organized. It can really start to not be organized, and then I think, especially when I finished a piece and I'm starting something new, I really clear my head by rearranging all the furniture and rearranging the space or cleaning everything. I think in some ways it's like organizing my mind. I can't have everything all over the floor. Whereas when I'm deep in the middle of something, like there's a tea mug that's been there for a week. I'm not that clean, but natural light is essential for my workspace. I haven't always been lucky enough to have that in my studio, but the one that I have currently is beautifully bright. I do use artificial light at night or when it's really cloudy and I need to, but that kind of has to be like, okay, like I have to force myself to do it. It's not about the perfect accuracy or having to see perfectly, I guess. It's more that I'm trying to create an atmosphere that really gets me into a certain mode. And I think with an overhead light or an artificial light, I want to go home. Like I don't get in the right headspace. I love it. I think it's the first studio that I've really felt like was mine. I just get to like live in this space that's not really in this world. My influences, evolve so much all the time. I think there's constantly new people that I'm discovering and I get excited by, and I think that it is a good thing for me not to be like completely obsessed with just one person, because I try to have this world of influence that then once it's filtered into my own language will never feel too much like I'm copying something or mimicking something that already exists. I think I'm most inspired by film. I think that's where I go to when I'm feeling I'm in a rut, is watching movies, particularly David Lynch, but also Ingmar Bergman and French New Wave films, as well as like 60s and 70s very campy horror films. I think that the whole combination of all of those worlds really inspires the place I want my paintings to live in. I think old horror movies really, they tell a very intense story while also on the outside kind of cutting straight to the raw emotions. They go past you needing to like identify or understand with what's going on. They just make you feel something right away. And I really, really appreciate that. So I am very inspired by vintage photography and some of the tricks that you can do with that medium. They would take a photo of a family or somebody, and then they would use double exposure to superimpose another character over top, which would be like this like ghostly image over the thing. And sometimes it was just like a blob of light, but sometimes it was really like a face with this sheet over them. And it's so kind of fake looking, but I also think people believed it because kind of willful ignorance for something that will bring you comfort. Painters that have particularly stuck with me over time, Paula and Modersohn-Becker, which I was lucky enough to see a complete exhibition of tons of her work here in London, I guess a couple years ago. Shahn, he's an illustrator and painter. Just the style of it, the surrealist way that he forms space. I think that was a huge influence on me, is not necessarily the characters or exact way that he draws, but the pushing of reality into these really creative compositions and like using the lines and the structure of what he's seeing to build what would be like a beautiful abstract image, but it's of things. There's a few galleries in Toronto and Montreal and Vancouver that I've recently really been inspired by the work that they put out. And one of them is Panjay in Montreal, as well as Towards Gallery in Toronto, and Pale Fire and Afternoon Projects in Vancouver are doing really interesting things. More recently, I've been really into Claude Cahun and Murray Oppenheim. I think they both hold this space of kind of a strange, surreal, almost humorous, but also very beautiful and kind of absurdity of life. That I think that quality relates a lot to my love of David Lynch and David Byrne, and that kind of in-between space of something kind of poking fun at how ridiculous our existence is, but also without completely diminishing the importance and the emotion and the intensity of it too. This is something I like to repeat when in my life I'm feeling a bit lost or like losing my sense of self, but also within my practice, I think it really relates to sort of grounding yourself and listening to your gut and realizing that, you know, you're just you, and you can't try to pretend to be, you know, other people that you admire or something that other people want you to be. My best friend Eryn, she said to me once, "Wherever you go, there you are." And I love that, and we always say that to each other. We go, "Wherever you go, there you are." And I think partly that's made me feel better about moving cities, about you know, trying to build a life in different places, but also build paintings that are really feel like me. And sometimes I just think they're always going to be me. They're always going to be like something that has come out of my brain, and I can't, as much as I have all these other influences, like you don't have to overthink trying to be authentic. I think she said Celine Dion said it first. When you start worrying about who you're supposed to be or what people want from you or the artists that you like and you want to be like them, or all of your inspirations and all the things that are kind of you're absorbing, I think it's all super important, but in the end, like, you're going to translate it into your own output, and you kind of can just let that happen naturally and trust your gut, do what you enjoy, what excites you, what you nerd out on, what like actually makes you want to spend way too long in the studio and stay past dinner, and like those things are what's going to actually be what is your best work.